when I finish, I'm leaving. And he laughed and he went, "You're never going to leave. You're going to be a lifer just like me." They were his words, and I'll never forget that. And I said, you watch. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we're joined by the incredible Wendy Brummel. Now, Wendy is a ex-professional figure line skater turned commercial property developer and mentor with a very large and very successful commercial portfolio. If you're interested in getting started in the commercial world, this is where you want to be for the next hour. Guys, if you get knowledge from this episode, if you're inspired by this episode, I would please ask you to follow the show and please leave us a review. It helps us so much to grow our visibility. Also, if you've got any questions around serviced accommodation or property in general, pop that question in the review. We'll pull it out, we'll give you a shout on the show, and we'll also answer that question as well. Until then, guys, get comfortable, grab a cup of tea. This is a fantastic episode with Wendy and so inspiring. I can't wait for you to hear it. Here we go. Wendy.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Long time friend.
Yes, it's been a while.
Got to know each other a little bit. A few years now.
Yeah.
Been following your journey. Successful businesswoman, commercial property developer.
Thank you.
There's a lot to get into in this episode. One of the reasons why I wanted to get you on, Wendy, is, women in business, I think, is fantastic. I'm a big fan. You got a lot going on in that space that I want to talk about, specifically to do with women and business and specific property, is it, with your ladies groups?
No, my ladies groups are basically just ladies in business. So
Okay,
it's
cool.
just helping women who either want to start a business or they could be in property. So I do get a lot of property developers, investors because of what I do, but then also like people in and around that industry, but loads of business owners.
Nice.
And yeah, just helping each other.
All right. Well, I want to get into that because that is really, really cool. Before we get into all the juicy stuff about where you are now and all the amazing things you got going on, of which I know there are many, you've done some pretty amazing stuff before you got into the property space, because I know you was pretty successful in another line of work. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Are you talking about figure skating?
I might be leaning into that just a little bit. We've got quite a famous, tell us about that, Wendy.
Yeah, so I mean, it all started because of Torval and Dean. So I saw them on the TV probably when I was about 7. And then I was literally saying to my mum, look, I really want to go figure skating. And she was petrified. So she was like, oh, you're going to fall over all the time. I don't, basically didn't want to take me. But then I kept on at her. And then I remember her getting an ice cube out the fridge and a knife.
Right.
And she was like, right, this is what it's going to be like. And I was just like,
I tell you what,
I want to go.
I'm not going to lie. I would think the same. Like I skated a couple of times, but I think it's a pretty scary sport.
Yeah.
Because those blades are pretty sharp, right?
They are. And I think she was worried about me, and I was quite young. And in the end, I pestered her and then just sat with her while she phoned the ice rink to like book me in. And so she did that and then took me. And I remember her just literally saying to me, look, you're going to be on your bum all the time.
Yeah. And that ice is hard.
And I was just like, yeah, I want to do it. And that was it really, just loved it. And then I just ended up skating, a long time. So
that started at 7?
7,
okay.
Yeah.
And you went right through to quite high level?
Yeah, so it was kind of like British championship style level. So
British champion?
Yeah, so I didn't win, but I was that kind of,
So was that you with someone else, or is that solo, like on the ice, or?
Bit of both.
Both.
So I used to do solos and ice dance. So the ice dance part is a bit like Torval and Dean, and then the solos is like, like jumps and spins. So I used to do a bit of both.
Did you do that thing where you get your leg up to like a right angle and spin around? Really fast.
I did do all that stuff. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I used to do I used to enjoy the jumps and spins. But then what I used to like about having a partner was that actually you could have a conversation while you're skating. It was quite nice. You just have a chat. Yeah.
What, not when you actually...
yeah, we did used to talk.
Just chatting?
Yeah.
When you're spinning around like a million miles an hour?
Yeah, just like when you're doing like lifts and things like that. Yeah, we used to have conversations.
Wow.
And I used to quite like that because it was company. I think when you get out on the ice rink and you're just there on your own, it's quite lonely. But then when you've got someone with you, it's quite nice because you've got someone to support you and have a conversation and chat about things on your way around. That's quite
wow.
nice.
So what age were you competing at the highest level?
Probably in my teenage years.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably, I don't know, in and around, just trying to think now, probably around 14, 15, up to about 18, 19. Kind of like as I was approaching university, and some of it while I was at university.
And I'm going to guess, and I may well be a long way off here, but, you know, I'm finding that as I do these episodes with successful people, you listen to the backstory and you start to like tie together like really important parts of their life that kind of contribute to the present time.
Yeah.
So would you say that figure skating at such a high level, did that teach you like the commitment, the dedication, the drive, the vision? Was all that kind of, do you think that's where it came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think for me, when I was at school, I was kind of like, I was doing my schoolwork and I was at school during the day, but then I had no time really to do anything else apart from go to the rink outside of school. And so I was really dedicated. I used to kind of get up crazy hours in the morning. You know, it's kind of like I was on the ice at like 5, 6 o'clock training. So I always kind of had that drive to do something I love doing. But then I think that's fed into my life now because I'm quite disciplined based on that. So I think it taught me like so many life lessons from doing all that stuff.
And it may not be something that you're aware of every day. You know, you're just this way, but it's like, well, it's just who I am. But actually, maybe if you hadn't have gone through that, you know, all of that training in the early mornings, maybe you wouldn't be who you are today. And I can somewhat relate because little secret some people don't know about me is I in a similar age I played cricket at a very high level.
I didn't know.
So I used to play county, which, you know, I didn't play for England, but I probably should have done. But, you know, without trying to sound, you know, a bit bent out of shape about it, cricket is there's a lot of politics. It's a little bit like rugby, you know, it's all about who you know, you got to be in with the right crowd. I wasn't, but I was pretty good. And I used to, you know, I used to feel really special when I used to be able to leave school early because I had to go and train, right? And I always felt like, and all the kids are looking at me like, how comes he gets to leave maths class early? But so yeah, I know a little bit about how that is as a kid, and it does teach you a lot, and no doubt that shaped who you are today.
I think it has, and actually that's what I wrote a book about was the mindset from professional sport into business.
Yeah.
So because there are so many parallels, and I think even if you go up another level, I analysed a lot of, you know, Olympic champions and their dedication, but I think more importantly their sacrifices at that level is just phenomenal. And it's almost like you go up to another level, but you can see how they transfer being successful in sport over being successful in the business world. It's that same kind of, I suppose, drive, discipline, determination.
Absolutely. And in a like kind of a weird way, it's actually easier to make it in business because some might argue that you need a bit of raw talent to do well in business, but I think not as much as you do in sports. Like in sports, you can put in all the work, but if you haven't got that gift, then you're probably not going to make it. Whereas in business, if you work, you grind every day, you've got the clear vision, you're going in one direction till you get there and succeed. As long as you do that, chances are you'll get there. It might take you longer than others or vice versa, but you will get there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I coached figure skating for 15 years as well. And what I found quite interesting was various competitors, you know, it wouldn't always be the best person that would win, which is interesting. It was often about what was going on in their head. And often it was about the person who thought they could win would often be the person that won. And I think you're right. I think there has to be a certain level of talent, but that just alone, I just don't think is enough. You almost, across talented people, if you got super talented up this end and you kind of had, you know, mid talent, probably the mid talent with the right mindset is the person that's going to win the day.
Yes.
But it's interesting seeing how people are with that.
I guess the caveat to that is it's got to be the right mindset, because I immediately think of people that I was playing cricket with that were really cocky.
Yeah.
That they're like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, you know, do this and do that. And for sure they'd go out and they'd get a golden duck, which is like they're bowled out first ball.
Yeah.
Because they were not that they were very confident, but they was cocky, and they weren't putting in the work in the background because they thought maybe, you know, I've just got it all, raw talent, I don't need to try as hard. So 100% mindset, but also, you know, it goes along with some other things, right? The recipe it needs to be a little bit more complete than just thinking that, you know, you're going to go out there and crush it. So okay, so we've got through to you competing at the British Championships. Is that what you said? And what changed? You know, did it just kind of eventually fizzle out, or you wanted to do something else? Like, how did it change?
Yeah, so I was at university. I was always balancing like the two things. And I think for me, it was probably about sacrifice and what levels, you know, I was comfortable with. And for me, I was trying to balance all those things. And I was just like, well, I was doing university at the same time, and I was doing a bit of coaching. And I just decided that's what I wanted to transfer into, because it's a heck of a lot of work.
It is.
And you also have to think, like, how far can I, you know, how far can I go? How far can I take this? And so that was what it was for me. I decided to go to university. I almost did all my tests, and so that I could then coach at a really good level.
Yeah.
And that's what I decided, rather than having, I suppose the sacrifice is the key thing. It's like, I often think about how successful you are. It's often related to how much sacrifice you're willing to make.
Absolutely.
And then I had a certain level of where that's at, and I loved it. And that was the thing. I think when you get a little bit higher, as you said, it's politics, it's pressure. But I never wanted to not love it. And sometimes when it's at a really high level, for some people they thrive and they love it. But for me, I was happy where I got to, and I never wanted to walk in the rink and think, this is a chore.
Yeah.
Always want to just love it. And that's what I love now. Like, now I'll just go and skate for fun and just really enjoy it, because I'm passionate about it, but it's on my own terms. It's really nice just to skate around. And that's what I love. It's just like the skate against the ice. It's just the best
Still
thing.
lights you up.
Yeah.
Amazing. Was you quite a high performer at school? Like uni and stuff? Was you quite focused and driven at school?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I was definitely not the most intelligent. Honestly, I had really clever friends. So maybe I had the right group, but I probably just worked hard. But maybe focused work, because I think that's another thing, isn't it? It's being like purposeful and focused in what you do. Because if you're not focusing on the right things or doing the right work, then you're not going to get the results, are you? If you're wasting your time on something. So I don't know. I was always quite focused.
It's interesting, you know, again, coming back to the conversations I'm having here on the show, everybody's got different backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'd say almost like more people who end up becoming entrepreneurs and business owners and doing all this cool stuff. I don't know, maybe it's a pretty 50-50 split between people who, you know, are well educated, you know, did really well at school, but then there's just as many that dropped out, had no idea, were completely lost, rebelled against authority, didn't have any confidence, went completely off piste, and then somewhere down the road, they found this natural business talent. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've always been kind of a one to, I suppose I wanted to go to university, maybe just had no idea how to get there, didn't know what I wanted to study. And I was never like, you know, right at the top of the class. I was always kind of probably bottom of the top people.
Bottom of the top.
Yeah.
I was bottom of the bottom.
Well, yeah, no, you weren't. I bet you weren't.
I was. I was in the snooker club most days.
Were you?
Yeah,
That sounds fun, though.
Yeah.
So I was in the ice rink and you were in the snooker club.
I was in the snooker club playing the fruit machines. Yeah, no uni for me.
Yeah.
So what did you graduate in? What did you study?
Computer science. Okay. Yeah.
Is that like IT?
Yeah, basically IT. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not very good with words. So I've written a book, right? And I'm not very good with words or spelling or anything like that. So when people say to me, oh, I'm no good at English, I can't write a book, I'm like, you can, because I've done it. But literally, you know, I get B's and D's the wrong way around and stuff like that, you know. But it doesn't mean to say I don't have ideas, and I can write stuff. It's just that it doesn't come easy. Numbers do, which is really, it's an interesting one. Like numbers, I find a lot easier. So that's kind of what I gravitated towards.
Is there maybe like some mild dyslexia there or something?
I don't know. I mean, I've never explored it. It's only, probably later on in life I've realised that, like when I say the word refurbishment, the amount of times I literally spell it out with a D.
Yeah, and in your line of work,
what?
that's quite a commonly
That's a
used
big
word.
thing.
Yeah.
I know. So it's just like it comes up all the time, and I'm just like, oh no.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it might well be because, and again, another common trait of high performing people is there's normally something that they're a little bit different in, and they're it's really, really interesting. But again, like, what's the point in even you go and get tested, you're dyslexic, okay, cool, thanks. It's
What do you do with it? It's just like, well, no, exactly.
It is what it is.
And I've come this far, it's just like,
I'd say you're doing okay. And Richard Branson has definitely done okay, and he can't even fill in his his hotel check-in information. So
yeah, it just shows you though, doesn't it, that it's kind of, again, probably what we're talking about, it's mind over matter, isn't it? If you really want to do something,
finding a way,
you find a way to do it, or I guess you find an excuse, don't you, not to.
Exactly, and keep comfortable. So you leave uni, you've got this degree, and you computer science. What comes next?
So I did do a couple of master's degrees as well.
Wow.
So I did an MSc, and then I did an MPhil as well. Yeah.
So now I'm going to take you back to when you said, I'm not that smart, I was kind of in the bottom group. Bullshit. You're really smart. You did all these extra degrees.
I think I have to be grateful for my clever friends.
Okay.
Because
you're a good copier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I think I was surrounded by really clever people that didn't seem to, I don't know whether it was true, but people that seemed to just not even revise. They probably did, and I didn't see it. But they just seemed to be so clever, it came so natural. And then I was always the one kind of almost like pedaling below the water trying to keep up.
Yeah.
But I think it did me a bit of a favour because I was always just trying to keep up with them. And I couldn't. At the end of the day, I couldn't. But I probably would have fallen a lot further behind, I think. So I am grateful for it in a way.
I'll tell you what I've found personally in my own situation is that when I was younger, I couldn't give a shit about education. I was really a bad kid, rebelled against everything, thought it was all crap, don't need it, left school with nothing. Obviously now as an adult, in hindsight, I'm like, what an idiot. But I've tried to make up for it as an adult. Now I love to learn, right? When you're paying for education as an adult, you definitely look at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to make up for that, but I think it's just, a lot of kids, they don't fit in to that box, and I've spoken about this before, like the archaic education system, well, if you're not good at ABC and you can't sit down and take these exams, then you're kind of framed as a bit of an outcast. But a lot of the time, those kids, they're going to come out and do something completely wild and end up doing way more than the smartest academic in the class with all the degrees. So, you can't base it all on that.
I don't think you can. And I think the world's changing in that area, which I think is great.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it was a very academic, I think, previously, wasn't it? But I think now it's getting recognised that, we're all different. Some of us like to climb and some of us like to swim. And,
sure.
We're all different. But, and there's places for everything. And you're right. There's so many school dropouts that just go on to be like millionaires.
Most of the biggest, the people that everybody knows of, the most of them are high school dropouts, the Alan 100%. Sugars and the Richard Bransons and these guys. Yeah. So it sounds to me, Wendy, like you were on track for like a corporate career.
That's exactly where I ended up. Yes. So there's no money in figure skating. No. Just pure love.
Torval and Dean probably done all right out of it, but I'd say
they did. Yeah, but I think if
unique.
You're probably right up at that level. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But even then, I don't think it's not like being a professional footballer.
No.
They're making a lot more money. So that wasn't so for me. I just loved it. And so I was really happy doing it. Still love it. But in order to earn the bucks, I needed to do a corporate career.
To go to work. And what did that end up becoming?
So, surprise.
Surprise. IT.
So I was in telecoms for, I don't know how long it was now. It's probably around 8 years. Program management. What does that
mean, telecoms?
Telecoms.
Something that gets bandied about, you never really know what it is.
So
programming.
Let me just maybe think about this now. So
we've only got 50 minutes left.
Take my mind right back. Hang on. So I started with Logica. So it's Logica CMG, I think it was when I started. But basically I was a consultant for them. And I used to work, I was contracted out to BT. And so I used to kind of work with British Telecom.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to kind of go around their telephone exchanges. For me, it was great. I used to travel around the UK. I loved it. Just meeting their planners, going into a lot of the telephone exchange buildings and just capturing what they did and trying to improve their processes and systems.
Okay.
Just because they needed to track, what was going in the ground a bit more diligently. So that's what I did. And that's where I started. And then I moved over to a company called Verizon, which you're probably not familiar with.
Verizon, the American company.
That's the one.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you are.
Well,
Wow.
only because I used to live in the States, so I know Verizon. Yeah.
So
Big
most
phone
times when
carrier.
I say that, people say Horizon,
Horizon, yeah.
and I'm like, no,
Verizon.
Verizon.
Verizon. Yeah, they're massive.
And I kind of say, if you've watched Sex and the City and you see all the telephone boxes there, they say Verizon on them.
Yeah.
So I worked for them for about 5 years as a project program manager, and then went to Vodafone and did the same job there, basically.
Wow, you really did the rounds.
Yeah. I was at Vodafone for about a year and a half, and then that's when I transferred over into property.
Okay. If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. So there must have been reasons, obviously, and we'll get to that as to why that happened. What when you was in the corporate job, obviously initially at the beginning, you was probably like, damn, this is good. I'm traveling all over the place, probably making decent money.
Yeah.
At what point did it start to get a little bit old and like, I can't see me doing this for the next 30, 40 years? Pretty early on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So actually it started at university. So I lived in a student house of multiple occupations. So for those who don't know, that's like a house share. And I was a bit late with my rent one month and I went to see my landlord and then he lived in a really nice house.
Right.
And so I was like,
ding.
Yeah, what do you do? And so he was quite good actually. He shared with me a little bit about what he did. I think he had 25 houses around the university campus, so student lets.
Yeah.
And then shared a bit with me about the numbers. And then I did the numbers back in my room, got a spreadsheet out, as you do, and then thought, probably why am I at university? Because I can earn more doing this. But you don't know what you don't know, do you? So I didn't do anything about it for a bit of time. I did the usual, right, I'm going to go and earn some money, go and do the corporate life. But there was something in me right back then that went, I don't know if you've ever had this, but where you start your corporate journey and you think, wow, that's for life. That's like, I don't know, 30 plus years. And I don't know, I had that thought. And I was like, I don't know if other people have that kind of thought, but it's like, it's a long time.
I tell you what, it's something that I think about a lot. I've spoken about this with friends and family multiple times. I don't know why. For example, when I went to work back way back when, very, very quickly when I was at that job, I was looking around at people that I was working with. And I very quickly started thinking, I cannot do this. Like there has to be more to life than getting up every day. I was working in a garage at the time, like out of school, driving to this garage in the pitch dark, freezing cold, spending 10 hours inside this, this roller shutter garage on my back, covered in dirt. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but my point is it's interesting. Why was I having those thoughts? And the other people that were in the garage, for them, it was just like, you know what? It is what it is. I've got the family at home. I come here, I give my time, I do this, and in return I get, some money, and that's okay. So I don't know what unless you've got parents that sit you down and say, come on, son or daughter, you've got to do something different. You don't want to be, waste your life in a job for blah, blah, blah. I didn't have any of that, but I still had those thoughts, those internal thoughts, which pushed me down a different road. Yeah. I don't really know why that is. Why do you think that is? What made you driving, cross country doing your telecoms and you're thinking, I can't do this for the rest of my life?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like, is it just if you have that kind of, maybe it's an early seed of an entrepreneurial mind?
Maybe.
I don't know. I think also for me, it was literally the fact, like you say, that there's nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong.
But like the 9 to 5 in terms of how long you're in the office, and then you go in the dark, you come out in the dark. I don't know. I just kind of thought to myself, surely there's got to be more to life than this. There must be, a better way. And with my dad, he really didn't like accounting. He did it all of his life. He didn't really like it. That had a bit of an impact on me, because I thought, well, if you're going to do something for the rest of your life, you really want to enjoy what you're doing. I think another part of me was actually I quite like to create my own strategies and have my own ideas. And I think that's something I got quite frustrated with in the corporate world. And let's be fair, I didn't really know enough about business in that time, but I certainly had like an idea of what I wanted to do, and that didn't always align. But there was a much bigger company and a lot of people above me that were kind of dictating that, which was like, well, fair play, they've earned that position. But for me, it's like, I just want to do my own thing. I was kind of like itching to kind of do things a lot more on my terms. But I guess it depends what kind of person you are, because there's a lot of people like in the corporate world, and I think that's where it suits really well, is where you're happy just going in and doing that, not having that responsibility.
Absolutely. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. It's, it works for a lot of people, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I mean, my dad was, he was in business his whole life. He did work for other people, but he had his own businesses for most of the time that I was on the planet. So no doubt that obviously, did rub off on me and kind of push me down a different journey. And I did have him, he would always support me in trying to do my own thing. So I think that definitely helps, but yeah, it's just a different way of thinking. And I remember like it was yesterday, I said to some of the guys that I was working in this garage with, I was doing my apprenticeship, it was like 4 years, this apprenticeship, and I said to my mate there at the time, Tony, older guy, had been there years, he was already like big, I shouldn't say fat, overweight guy, bald head, doing all the hours, all the overtime. And I remember saying to him, Tony, like, I swear to God, when I finish, I'm leaving. And he was, and he laughed and he went, you're never going to leave. You're going to be a lifer just like me. They were his words, and I'll never forget that. And I said, you watch. And I did.
Did that inspire you though? Did you like take that and go, oh my God, no, that's not going to be me?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I wondered if that would be the case.
And the day that I finished and I finished my apprenticeship, I wrote my letter and I walked in there and I said, I'm done. And I packed up and I went to Greece and never really looked back. But it's interesting to me what makes people think differently and not accept that this is going to be the next 40, 50 years of my life doing this. I can't do it. And you hear it at the same time, like the same thing.
It's an interesting one. And I think we need all types of people in the world, don't we?
Yeah.
Because, like repetitive jobs for me is not something I can do. And yet when I chat to my VA, she loves nothing better. She's like, I love all those jobs.
Structure.
Hand them over to me. Just like I put some music on and I just do the same thing. It's quite easy. And I'm like, do you know what? I get that. You can just listen to some tunes and do that. But for me, it's not something I can do. I would lose concentration in probably wouldn't even last 5 minutes. But her, she can do that for hours. And it's just like, well, I think it's just different people. And we need all these different people, don't we, to fulfill all these roles. Otherwise, I suppose it would be really boring if we're all the same.
Why do you think it is, Wendy, that, entrepreneurialism or being different isn't really embraced and taught in schools? What's your theory on that?
That's an interesting one as well. So I think, we're designed to conform, aren't we? In terms of, right, this is the path you follow. You go to school, you do, college, university, and get a job. But then I suppose from a government point of view, that feeds a lot more back into the economy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When, if you're entrepreneurial, it's, I don't know. I suppose it does in some ways, but it's not quite the same, is it, as having like a 9 to 5 job? That's what's supported. That's what's promoted. And so if you're doing something a bit different to that,
I've got
I don't know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, my theory, and some people might say, you know, I'm a conspiracist or going down the rabbit hole or whatever. But I honestly believe that to me, there is absolutely no logical explanation as to why kids right up to leaving high school don't know what a credit card is, don't know what mortgages are, don't know what cash flow is, don't know basic, you know, idea of debt, good debt versus bad debt, whatever. And I honestly believe it's because they want to keep you stupid and keep you tied into the system and keep you in debt and keep you, you know, because then they've got the control. You know, I do think there's an element of that, because there's no other logical explanation as to why kids would leave at 16 and not know literally anything about life.
It's really true, actually, in terms of like what you're mentioning, in terms of like managing money. Because, so here's the thing. I at the moment do not have any credit on a credit card. That works against my credit score, because what that's saying is that basically I can't manage money. And I'm like, well, aren't I managing money really well if I don't need money on a credit card?
Back to front, right?
But my credit scores have dropped because of that. And I'm like, what does that teach you? It teaches you to spend money on a credit card. And that to me is like, I get it if you're kind of, you know, we chat probably quite a lot about depreciating and appreciating assets. And I guess if you're using the money for something that's appreciating, then sure, it's a good investment, isn't it? Like, you know, properties and the like. But, you know, how many times are people buying stuff on credit cards and going into debt for essentially depreciating assets? And the problem is, as you quite rightly say, they don't know the difference. And there's no kind of financial education around that at school.
And you're penalised because you've got yourself into a position where you can go and buy the phone outright.
Yeah.
But because you're not financing it, you get penalised for that, and your credit rating goes down. Yeah. Which is that's a pretty deep subject.
So I need to go and spend my money now on a credit card.
Go get your credit cards, max them out. Yep, 36 monthly payments. That's the way to do it, and to boost your credit score. So, all right, so let's start moving into the interesting, juicy stuff. So, how did this property stuff come about? Because I think there's a lot of different property strategies, as we know, right? There's flips, there's buy-to-lets, there's HMOs, there's service accommodation. I think that commercial development is seen by most people as like the kind of top tier, you know, once I've done everything else, you know, I'll start to dip my toes into the commercial world. Yeah. It's scary. It's big numbers. It's lots of finance. It's confusing. It's complicated. There's lots of people involved in just one project. So did you just go straight into that, or did you do some other property stuff beforehand?
Yeah, I did do some other property stuff beforehand. So I started with doing, say, like buy-to-lets, and then I did HMOs, so houses and multiple occupations. So I did kind of that to start my journey off. And then I actually got into converting commercial buildings because I was looking for somewhere to put my pension. Yep. So I had my money in a SAS pension, and I was like, well, I want to find a commercial unit to just put that money in. That was where it started. And so I started looking online to find something that would meet that criteria. It wasn't loads of money. I didn't have a massive pension. And then I saw this really expensive commercial unit, which is quite amusing. And nobody was looking at it because obviously it looked really expensive for this kind of small commercial unit. And so I booked a viewing, and then literally it was the whole building. So then it seemed like a bit more of a deal, as it were. So, but no one else was kind of looking at this because it was kind of listed incorrectly. And that's kind of what I often say to people is actually, if something doesn't seem quite right, that's whether it's too high, too low, or if something doesn't look quite right about a listing, then get involved. Yeah.
And just to, without jumping in, but what Wendy just, so I've done some training with Wendy on the commercial stuff. And I remember that from what you was talking about, how many listings out there are missing like key things. And then if you get to the point where you make an inquiry, they're like, oh yeah, it's got full planning. We just didn't put it in the listing or whatever,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
And it's like, what?
Yeah.
That's very common, right?
Very common. Because things, agents are, just like, they're just human, like everyone, right? And it's like, well, they put things in the wrong, buckets and,
commercial stuff on residential listings.
That's it. So that's why it's good to just check everywhere. And I recently got a mentee, actually, who's looking at something that is in a residential bucket that's commercial. And again, less eyeballs on it. So this is the thing. It's like when you find something that's not quite in the right place.
So many bad agents. So many bad agents. It's criminal. Because that vendor potentially might end up getting a much lower selling price because the agent just effed up and put it in the wrong bracket.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, the agent in my case was like actually thought they'd done the right thing, weirdly enough.
Right.
Because obviously I wasn't going to share because then he'd realise, by the
way, can I give
like,
you $500,000 more, please?
Exactly. But yeah, interesting. It's interesting when you speak to them and just find out a little bit more. But obviously you have to be careful how much you ask because you don't want to then ruin your own chances. So it's always kind of balancing that out a little bit.
So presumably, I'm always aware, and I say it on every episode, people who are sitting at home listening, thinking, shit, I'd love to do commercial, but it's such a scary idea. And hopefully within this episode, we can kind of debunk that. But
sure.
Did you presumably you did training around it? Like you did some property stuff beforehand, so you got some experience. But then did you go and train specifically in commercial before you did your first project? No,
I didn't, because at the time there wasn't the training out there. This was probably pre when commercial conversions was more of a thing. I did get property training when I first started, so I was educated, but this was a new area for me. But then quite often what I say to people is this comes up a lot about commercial being scary. And then I think for some people it is, and I think it is for people who actually want to accelerate their journey. They want to do like financial freedom in one deal. So I think it does fit a certain type of person. However, there are people that I work with that also do slightly smaller deals. And sometimes, like for example, if you've got a doctor's or a dentist building, probably was a house back in the day,
right?
And that might suit, for example, like 5 flats or something.
Yep.
So, or it could be like a shop and a top. They're not always huge, but you can get a nice profit from them. And then that relates to people a little bit more because there's quite a lot on the high street at the moment, for sale or to let. So there's some opportunities, I think, at different levels. But you're right, it does put some people off.
I think some people have a if I say Wendy's a commercial property developer, then I think a lot of people's minds immediately go to like, a 1,000 house site, like a Bellway or a Wimpy Homes. It's not, there's so many different, like you were saying, different parts of the commercial development world. It can just be a shop conversion or like you said, a dentist into a house. And now there's all of the advantages with the permit development, right? With the Class C office spaces, because there's this big drive to convert all of these old office blocks that are no longer being used post-COVID into the much needed residential sectors.
Absolutely.
So there are massive opportunities.
Yeah.
So what was your first kind of dip into the commercial world then? You haven't done any training, there's so much to do and know and learn. Where the hell did you begin, like doing the first one? Yeah,
so I think on my first one, I made a lot of mistakes that I wouldn't do now.
Yeah.
And I probably learnt the hard way. When I'm training people now, I share a lot of this because, I did learn the hard way. And if I'd have had the opportunity to do education, 100% would have done it because I would have missed out on all those things. But I started off with a shop and a top. That's where I began, which is why, when I'm talking to people now, I'm like, you could start off with something like that. It's sensible if that's where you want to start. If you want to go and do bigger, you can. There's no rule. And sometimes this is the thing, you know, just because it's bigger doesn't mean to say it's more difficult. It's just kind of, you know, there's probably more money involved and things like that. But it doesn't mean to say that it's a more difficult project. It's just like the zeros, get more zeros.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's scary for people, right?
And again, that's something that will develop over time. When you're in this business, property, you start to put less emphasis on the numbers, and you start to understand that if you can find the deal, and you know what you're talking about genuinely, and you're not trying to sell bullshit, you will find the money, right? It doesn't matter how many zeros, as long as there's, at the end of it, there's one or two more zeros than what you bought it for, and the deal works, and they will just become numbers on a page.
Absolutely. And sometimes for investors, that's actually more interesting because essentially they can make more profit. So I think we're often kind of limited, aren't we, by our own financial thermostat.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we see it from the other side, actually it's got to be worth it for an investor, for them to invest. Yeah. So sometimes you've got higher numbers, they're like, oh, there's more profit in it for me. But as you quite rightly said, it's all about the deal. And for some of them that I do, you know, I may have told you that, you know, I do the barn, usually I do planning game on them. Yeah. But with those ones, you know, I don't own them and I don't build them out. I just make a profit from, you know, doing the permitted development on them. They're class Q. They're a bit more difficult than doing the class C that we were chatting about, but you know, they're possible. And for them, they're not super huge. So I do have a few people interested in that as well. Yeah.
So let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because, you know, you said a little bit there and just kind of brushed over it, but people at home, they're like, what class Q? What the hell's that? So yeah, so I've got a vague, so you've basically found a bit of a niche in, well, why don't you go ahead and explain it a lot better? What is it that you do exactly that you just spoke of then?
Yeah, so this came from doing commercial conversions and chatting to my agent, and he just said to me, would you be interested in a barn? And this one is a class Q. So for barns, there is a criteria. It is longer than, so I won't go into detail now, but it is a bit longer than what you'd have for a class E. But basically within that, for some barns, you can convert them into residential without needing full planning. So you can do it under permitted development.
And they're stunning, some of these barn developments. So some of these newer ones that I'm sure we've all seen, you go into the country and, you know, there'll be a beautiful black kind of style. Yeah. I think is it Essex? Don't they call it like Essex cladding or something? That beautiful black.
There's a black cladding, but there's also like, what is it? Is it the red cedar as well? It's lovely. Oh, there's some really beautiful cladding.
So would most of those be new built barns, or would they be converted like existing barns, or would it just be a kind of a mix?
Could be a mix. Some of them might be converted. I think the key thing though is when you're converting one, you do have to conform to, I suppose, what the planning authority are going to accept. So sometimes you can go, do you know what, I'm going to do this beautiful cladding, but then they've got to look if that fits in with the countryside. So sometimes you can be a bit restricted on that. So it's always kind of balancing, you know, that out. But the idea with them, if you're doing it under permitted development, is that you can't rebuild it. There's a very grey area between rebuilding the thing and converting it.
Okay, interesting. So maybe you can't necessarily add space to the footprint. You can just kind of convert it, like reform it.
Yeah, so you kind of have to work within the existing structure. There has been an update, it was in March, that you could extend, forgotten what they did now, I think it was like 4 meters or whatever, so you can do a bit of an extension now. So there's been a few changes to make it easier now to convert barns, but yeah, when I've done them, I've not been able to work outside of where the existing structure is. You can do things like, obviously, you think of a barn, you can add walls, you can add windows, you can add doors. So there's a lot more freedom and flexibility in comparison with like the E-Class, for example, because you can't change any of the outside of the building when you do that one.
Got you.
So, yeah.
Very, very cool. And how proud to stand back at the end and look at this beautiful barn conversion, you know, and say, wow, you know, I did that. Or even if you just get taking it through planning and selling it on and make, you know, there's so many different ways you can do it. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, Wendy, like, I think with commercial, one of the things that, you know, I tried to go down that road. I very much hope to go down that road at some point. I think it's you know, would be amazing to do it. But one of the things that I struggle with a little bit, and I think other people might have the same thoughts, is that it's a long play, right?
Yes.
So yes, you're going to do really well, hopefully, once you exit a project. But realistically, if you're doing anything even reasonably substantial, raising the or sourcing the deal, raising the finance, handling the project, exiting, we're talking about like a year minimum, maybe 18 months, right?
Yeah.
Before you're going to see any gain.
Yeah, very true.
So I think a lot of people think, well, that sounds great, but I need something that's going to make me money next week or in the next month or two. So they go down a slightly different road. So
yeah,
how would you speak to that to kind of help people, put people's minds at rest around that subject? How would you handle that? Let's say that you're working in a job, you hate the job, you love the idea of commercial, but you're like, I'm working and it's going to take me 18 months before I make any money. Like, I'm just going to go and do something else.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it is something that comes up quite a lot because they are longer term projects. I think there's a couple of things there. So I think often when we're kind of going through this with some of our mentees, we do find ways for them to cash flow themselves through projects. So we do share like tips and tricks of how they can do that and how they can fulfill some of the roles in the project. So there are possibilities to do that to kind of help until you get your big payout at the end, because you're right, you've got to build it out and sell or exit onto, say, renting or serviced accommodation to start to get the profits back. So I think that's one way that you can do it that we often share. The other way, of course, is to say for people that have already got a portfolio, then they can build up the bread and butter side of things whilst they're doing, say, the bigger projects. And I often talk about this because I diversify, and I think you have to be careful in balancing that as well, because you know what it's like if you try and do everything, you do nothing. But I think you probably can follow 70% doing one strategy, 20% on one, 10% on the other. And I almost think you're right, commercial is a bit of a longer term game. You get bigger payout, you get kind of a lot more units in one go. If you do buy to let, just take that as an example, you are bringing them on one at a time. Yeah, it's going to take probably longer, but you probably start to see the cash flow a bit quicker. That's the point, right? But then when you're doing commercial, you can cash flow yourself through it, number one. But number two, I think it's probably good to have something else that you're doing alongside it. So something like service accommodation, like you do, where that's bringing in the cash flow. And so I think you almost want a cash flowing strategy and also your commercial running alongside it. And I think that's where there's probably a nice opportunity in like service accommodation combined with commercial, which is kind of what I talk to quite a lot of my mentees about, because I think that's a really good way to get cash flow and big chunky sums of cash in one hit. Yeah,
great advice and refreshing to hear that you're honest about that and not just saying, you can just go into commercial and you don't need anything else. Yes, it's always good to diversify and have multiple streams of income that we know about. What are your thoughts, Wendy, around people just going straight into this space? Because there are a lot of people now that are popping up that, I won't mention any names, but, that are saying, you don't need to do anything property related. We're going to teach you everything that you need to know to come sit our course and then go out and just start building houses. I'm not even talking about doing, small shop conversions or office space conversions. Literally go out and start buying sites and building houses. I don't necessarily have an opinion around it, but I'm interested to know what you think about it. I'm not going to, because a lot of people jump all over it and say it's impossible. We had the same conversation in our space in serviced accommodation. We believe and we teach the people that we work with to go straight from nothing into SA management, because we believe that if you have the systems and the processes and the help and the hand-holding and the education, you don't necessarily need to spend, 2-3 years doing rent to rent before you go out and do management.
Yeah.
Letting agents, they'll go and open high street shops without knowing anything about lettings, right? And we believe it's the same thing. You've just got to have the education in place.
Yep.
And then we do think you can go out. But other people are like, man, what are you talking about? You got to do it. And we're like, well, what's the difference? If you're taking a property on yourself as a rent to rent, you're doing the same things on that property as you would be on someone else's as management. Yes. Yeah. Some might say, well, you're playing with somebody else's money and someone else's investment. But if you're doing it ethically and genuinely, and you really do have the level of knowledge and you're doing all the right things, I don't see the problem with it. So I'm not going to jump all over the idea of just going straight into development. But I'm interested in your opinion.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it is following whatever you do, processes and systems, I think, in order to get yourself from like A to B. I don't think anything's easy. I think, we come proficient in things and we're all different. So probably it might take somebody, I don't know, a year to do something. It might take somebody else like, a month. So I think we're all different in terms of how quickly we learn, what we're interested in, and where our risk factor and, finance thermostat is. We're all different in that. So I think that means that people will go in at different levels. And so I think, look, there's always kind of a space for, like, for example, the no money or little money down strategies, creative strategies, which they can be tools to help you get properties, right? So that can kind of be a good way in. Serviced accommodation, sure. I mean, it's great for cash flow. There's no doubt about it. And I think, it is a good way to, I think, start up and do something quickly. If you're kind of doing developments, it's an interesting one, having, I've done a self-build and it wasn't easy. Is it following a system and a process? Well, yes, but I'd probably say it can be quite challenging. And then I don't know what it's like really to do something like that, having not done any property beforehand, because I've got to be open and honest and say I have. All right. Did I feel more comfortable having cut my teeth on other things? I'll probably say, yeah. I'm just going to be, I might as well be honest about it. I do. And I think that's where I think it's good to cut your teeth on something else. Like if you're doing like commercial conversions, for example, I almost think it can be really good to cut your teeth on something smaller, make all your mistakes, do that, just get through it and make your profit out the end. It's never going to be perfect. It's not going to be your best deal. But then you learn so much from that you can then apply and then up it each time. And it's not a bad way to go. And it's still going to be probably a bigger project than what you would do if you were just doing a standard buy, refurbish, refinance. But I think the one thing for me with development, one thing I'm just going to say about that is, I think if you're coming out of the ground, that's where you've got so many unknowns. That's the tricky bit about it, because that's where costs can get added on, and I've seen that. So that's where I feel when you're doing like new builds, if you're doing new builds with planning, obviously that makes sense. You will get planning on it. So great. So they're, a safer way to start. But then I think you've got to be very clear about, what costs are involved and have contingency to take care of anything that's coming out of the ground.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And I think that with commercial, that everything's bigger, right? So yes, the opportunity out the back end, if successful, is greater. Yeah. But also if you make mistakes, the mistakes are going to be bigger. And a lot of the time, it's not going to be your money. You're working with other people's money unless you're in a very fortunate position. So, you need to make sure that you can mitigate and de-risk that project. And I think, the chances of you being able to do that confidently are going to be less if you've done nothing than if you've done stuff beforehand, because it's just, you're just going to have more knowledge and more confidence around the whole thing. The two biggest barriers that I see, like I always say, I think commercial is amazing. I think it can completely change your life, and I hope to get involved at some point. But I see the two biggest challenges in my mind, and maybe you can, help me argue them points. Is the first thing is, how the hell do you source the deal, right, as a new developer or as a new to the space, when there's so many I went to look at a project. The one that comes to mind, there was a great care home, in Chelmsford, and I went to see it and I was like, this is amazing. Didn't have any planning. And I put an offer through to the agent, and she said, look, we've got like 10 developers with cash ready to go. They don't care about planning because they've already done multiple projects. They've got mates at the council, right? They know they're going to get planning. How the hell do you compete? There's lines of Range Rovers going down the road with developers in there with big bags of cash. So I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I think that's a big challenge. And I think also for people to raise the finance needed until they've got all of those case studies and experience under the belt. So what would you speak to them 2 points?
Okay, I'll take the first one, which is about the deals.
Because you're the one in the Range Rover with a bag of cash.
I have the Range Rover.
Wendy's the one that we're fighting against.
I'll be the one driving away, right? That you're like, hang on.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I think for me, and this is speaking from personal experience, it's more about building the relationships with the agents, and that takes a bit of time, I think. And that's the key thing. You know, I think with people saying that they're new, I think with that one, obviously you want to be you want to be authentic, you don't want to lie about anything. But if you go in quite confident, that's the thing. But confidence also comes from doing stuff. So I think going in confident, often you don't get asked. And I think that's the thing. You don't have to say one way or the other. If you get asked, be honest. You know, I wouldn't be up for going, right, tell them you got a portfolio and you've done this 10 times before. Does not make sense. It's not a good way to go. But I also don't think you have to overshare. If you go in confident and you're, you know, saying this is what I'm looking for, and I think you're educated. I think this comes up quite a lot. I think it's worth being educated and understanding the process systems to follow so that you can do these type of projects. Because as you mentioned earlier, you know, they are bigger numbers. But if you work with people who have been there before and done these types of projects, then you've got someone to talk to about them. And I think that also helps when you go into some of these discussions, because a lot of my mentees talk to me about what am I going to say, how am I going to approach this, how am I going to get, you know, some of these opportunities that are not currently on the market, because that's probably where the magic happens, is where you're kind
before it's in the shop window.
Yeah. And that's how the barn option came up. You know, that never went on the market. That was something that came, you know, to me.
You proactively went out and sourced and had the conversation.
Yeah, I had the conversation. Well, the agent, called me on it. But it does take, you know, it does take work to get to that point. And I think that's the thing. I think people underestimate how much work that takes to get to that point.
Yeah.
So for me, it's building the relationships with agents to kind of get to that place where you're talking to them about things that haven't quite got on the market. And I often tell people, just sign up to all the portals, you know, check in with them. You've got to be quite proactive. That's the thing.
Would you say, Wendy, that when you're just starting out, it's all relative, right? Whether you're gonna go and do a conversion and buy an office to convert, or whether you're going to go and out and start building new builds. If you walk into an agent and say, I've just seen this tower block in Mayfair, you know, for 80 million that I'd like to talk to you about, there's a high chance they're going to say, okay, can we know a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from?
Yeah.
Similar with if you're doing new builds. If you go in and say, I've just seen this, you know, 1,000 hectare site, I want to build, you know, 300,000 homes, they're going to ask some questions. But if you go in and say, oh, I've just seen this, you know, what do you call it? An shop and top.
Shop and top.
Something like that. And at the same time, you know, you're confident, you got the lingo, right? You know what to say. You've done a bit of training, you've educated yourself. They're not really going to sit down and grill you.
No.
It's all about how you come across. Or if you go in and say, hey, I've seen that there's an acre of land for sale, you know, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to put 2 houses on there. Start realistic. You know, I think would go a long way to get started. Just my thoughts.
I think you're right. And there's plenty of profit in that, far beyond, you know, like a buy, refurbish, refinance type project.
Yeah.
Still a lot of profit in deals like that.
Yeah.
So I think you can start there and still make a decent profit. And you're right. I think that is easier.
Yeah.
And that can be a really good way to start. And that just gets you going.
Yeah.
And it can just feel more doable.
It makes it all feel a bit more real, doesn't it? And a bit more doable.
Yeah, because I think this is another thing. It's just like, it's stretching yourself to your comfort zone. So again, everyone's different, but you want to be hitting the ball as far as you can in the ballpark. Yeah. You don't want it outside the ballpark, because then it's too far away. That's where probably you sit and don't do anything. Yeah. And I think if you're hitting it as far as you can personally, where, you know, you feel comfortable, then that's where it's at, I think, for most people. That just stretches you just enough to do a bit more, but it doesn't, you know, make you feel, oh, I can't do this. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point you raise, because going in Mayfair, like, I don't know, as you said, 80 million, did you say 80 million?
Yeah, why not? 100 million. Yeah,
100 million.
It's all just numbers on the paper. But yeah, I think that's just something to consider. Yeah. So, okay, cool. So we've spoken about quite a few things there. Hopefully we've helped people open up the door of possibility a little bit wider to the idea of getting into the commercial world, because I do think most people look at commercial and think, well, you've got to be worth millions before you even, get your feet wet. There are ways, but I do think having some education around it, helps a lot. And in this day, people like Wendy that are teaching this stuff, that have the experience and the knowledge and can teach you all of the tips and tricks in the matter of a few weeks or a few months that it's taken you years.
Yeah, it's true.
To learn, right? The life of hard knocks and the mistakes and the awkward conversations so if you're interested, come speak to you, right? And get educated around it. I want to speak lastly, Wendy, about some of the other stuff that you got going on. Okay. You're an established author. I want to talk a little bit about this Women in Business, which I think is really, really cool. So tell us a little bit about that, about how you're helping other people get started.
Yeah, so I run just local to me, a Ladies at Latte for Women in Business. It's a real cool little group. It's like 5 minutes from my house. We kind of just meet in a country house, totally free. And all we do is just chat about our businesses. We work together, we connect with each other, and it's just a lovely meeting. It's about an hour. We run it once a month, so fourth Friday of the month. And it's really just to, I suppose, just help women either get started or take their next step.
And are these women already in business, or can you come along if you're just looking to get started and inspired?
Yeah, if you're looking to get started, we do get people that are looking to get started and just don't know where to go, what to do, don't have a big budget. They might even still be working 9 to 5, or they might be, I don't know, sometimes we get some mums who have got a little bit of time, but they're looking to say do something different or run their own business or whatever. Anything from, I think the key thing is they're thinking about starting a business or want to start a business or just about to start. So that kind of, I suppose, that type of person, or they're running a business and they want to get themselves to the next level, or I guess connect with like-minded people, have conversations if they're having a few struggles, talking about that.
And you cannot underestimate the power of being in the room, because, you can sit at home and you're like, oh, I hate my job and I want more control and, I need to invest and I need to start a business. But if you're just sitting there, like mindlessly scrolling through the 150 billion different online businesses or business opportunities that are available to down the internet, you end up just, putting your head in your hands and saying this is all impossible. But if you're in the room with people who are doing it, physically there, having the conversations, it all starts to get a little bit more real.
It's really true.
It's so true.
It seems so difficult, doesn't it, there's so many options now, like now more than ever. And so that can be amazing on one side of it, because you're like, oh, I can do all these things. But on another side, there's being overwhelmed, isn't there? Where it's like, what do I do? What space do I go in? And we see that a lot. And, also people getting stuck, that happens. We all get stuck, don't we? It's just part of sharing the journey, and it's kind of helping get a bit unstuck. And
so it's not just property; it's general business, general support and inspiring each other, holding each other accountable.
Yeah, obviously, because I do property, I get quite a few ladies in property. That's kind of how it is, and in and around that industry. So, I trap those type of people because of what we do. But yeah, it doesn't have to be that. It can be any. And
where is that based?
So it's like North Bristol. So I live in a sleepy little town called Almondsbury. And so it's not too far from there. It's about 5 miles away, probably in a place called Whitchurch. Okay. Yeah, I think that's where it is.
All right.
But nice little area.
It sounds really, really nice. Is there anything that you do online or?
We have a Facebook group. So if anyone wants to join it, it's totally free. It's just North Bristol Ladies Who Latte.
Okay. I do think it's sad how many people are at home, like, who've got this really strong desire to do something else, and they just don't know where to start, and it never starts because of that. Doesn't. And there's so much self-doubt and issues with self-confidence and not believing that it's possible. Yeah. That I think I know someone personally who's they're at the very early stages of a startup, and if you never leave your house and you're just sitting there like,
It's so true.
At some point, you're like, this is bullshit. This is never going to work. I've been on this thing for 3 months and I'm still not making any money. And you just close the computer and go, forget about it. But if you get out your house and you take it out to your group or another networking group and you start talking to people and telling people about it, and they're like, damn, that is a great idea, or you should go do that, and you're amazing and you're confident and you're capable and you can do this. You go, it just lifts you up and it kind of lights a fire and it keeps the momentum.
It's really true because, we know from being in property, don't we? You can get a lonely journey. Yeah. And I think it's the same, whatever business you're doing, when you're first starting out, it can be lonely and you just end up having conversations with yourself. And of course, that not always is the best conversations to be having.
We're our worst critic, right?
We are, because we've got two voices, haven't we? Got one voice going, yeah, do this. And then the other voice is going, no, what are you thinking? Yeah. Why are you doing that? Yeah. That's not going to work.
Just stick in the job.
Like, yeah.
It's safe, it's comfortable, it's reliable.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we do get some tears on it, because, things like your why come up and, that's always a little bit emotional. But also we're quite open to being honest with feedback as well in terms of, right, what you're looking to do and where we think, direction might be, because sometimes people can get all caught up in an idea. Yeah. And it's kind of being honest with the feedback. Tangible
steps.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's like steps to follow. Yeah. And often people think of the whole journey rather than what are the first 2 steps I can do. And again, that's where I think it can get overwhelming, because you're just like, oh my God, you're right at the start. And it's like,
and I think that's also the importance of, we've spoken about it on here a bunch, like working with someone who can help you with that process. Not necessarily, education, mentors, but also a potential partner, because you might be like the visionary that's ready to light the world on fire, build all these houses or do all these conversions and make all these millions. Yeah. So you've got a really clear idea, but you're like, I don't even know where to begin. And then you work with someone who can sit down and go and say, okay, we need to create a spreadsheet. We need to look at the facts and the numbers and the analysis and really create a really professional business plan, for example, to present to someone. So collaborate with people that maybe can complement your not weaknesses, but like your lesser strengths.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's the beauty of working with other people, because we've all got strengths and weaknesses, haven't we? Yeah. And they're not always aligning. So it's good to have somebody who's better at something else, kind of going, hey, look, have you thought about this, or what about this? And, it's not their strength. Yeah.
Everybody needs that superpower in their life. I've got someone that, if I don't know how to do something, or I need advice, or I need to kick up the arse, I'm just like, and she whips me into shape, and I put the phone down always feeling like I can take on the world, so you need to work with other people.
And we all need it, because we can't do it ourselves. So we have to have someone else.
I mean, you're pretty perfect, but
I'm not.
Not everybody is as perfect, but
definitely not. I'm a work in progress. That is for sure.
We're all a work in progress. Wendy, as we start to get closer to wrapping this thing up, even though we could talk for hours, I know. Such good juicy stuff here, impossible to cover it all in one episode. Yeah. Tell me about your book. I want to know about that.
Yeah, so it's called A Successful State of Mind. Okay. It's on Amazon. And basically with that, it's about the mindset from professional sport into business.
Which you know all about.
Which I know a lot about. And so the idea is that, we can get knowledge, but what helps us take the action is often what's going on between our 2 ears, right? So that's what I talk about in the book, and ways that, I suppose, like what we've just been talking about, how you can take the next steps, how you can reframe things in order to, stop procrastinating, to, move further on in your journey. So that's what it's about. It's like persistence, resilience, all those kind of things, sacrifice, all that good stuff. And one thing with that book is I donate all the profits to a dog charity. So
I'm buying it. Dogs over people.
Dog charity.
I love dogs.
So my dog inspired a lot of the content in there. So it was dog walks in COVID, that, I'd be out in the countryside, I'd be thinking through the content, making notes. And so I'm grateful to my beloved Pooch.
What dog is it?
That. He was a Labrador. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Black lab.
Beautiful. Black lab. He was a golden Labrador called Luca. Okay. Yeah, he was gorgeous.
Oh, is he not around anymore?
No, I know. We lost him last year. But
so hard.
It's really, really horrible when you lose them. But he had an amazing life.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to think, he had a great life with us, and he was just coming up for 12. We
good
loved
innings.
every minute of it.
That's like, what, 90 odd for a dog?
It's really, that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, so he did well, treated well, enjoyed his life.
Guys, if you need any more of a reason to go out and buy Wendy's book, other than the fact that it goes to the dog charity, you know, and then on top of that, you're going to learn all about mindset and how to get started, then I think it's a no-brainer. And we can get it on Amazon, right?
Amazon, yeah, it's about £10. And if you want to master your mindset and give to a good cause at the same time, that would be awesome.
Amazing. We all need to go and get that book. Wendy, one last question. Ask you to be a little bit vulnerable, if that's okay.
I can do that.
Yeah, so it's just, you know, kind of around mental health. You know, I'm a big advocate for mental health. You know, I think a lot of people are struggling in today's world. A lot of comparisons on social media, beating themselves up at home, pedestalizing people. And people are going to be watching this, listening to this. You know, you've got the Range Rover, you've got the commercial developments, right? You've got the book launch, setting the world on fire. And I like to ask, you know, for you, seemingly having done all this stuff, uber successful, you know, professional sports person now turned successful commercial property developer. How's your mental health? Are you happy in your heart and your head? Do you still have the wobbles day to day every now and then? Is there any tears in private with your partner? Just to kind of bring it back down to a bit more of a realistic level.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I'm not a person who actually usually outwardly shares this, but I'm going to be honest. I have ups and downs in my journey, like most of us, because, you know, sometimes things go really well, sometimes they don't. And, you know, there's kind of things that not just go on, say, in your property and your business world, but also like your personal and your private life as well. There's always stuff going on, isn't there? So I'm the same. And so something for me recently, just to share with you. So I know we were talking about my dog. Well, it's about a year ago. So it was a year ago. Was it last month that we lost him? And so we went to Portugal, and it was kind of quite nice being away. I like to try and do something like for my dad's birthday. My dad passed away about 3 years ago. But on his birthday, I try and go out for dinner. I was trying to do something nice and look through the pictures. But yeah, I do find all that stuff really hard. You know, I did love my dog at the end of the day. And so I was quite upset on that day. I looked through pictures, and there I am sitting in Portugal with a drink and some nibbles, and this is really sad. So I do, and I don't like to dwell on it, but yeah, that happened. And also, like, even with my dad, you know, my dad passed away in COVID, and he had Alzheimer's. And so it was really, really tough, especially leading up to that time. Because you know what it's like in COVID, you couldn't go see him. So I hadn't probably seen him for a couple of months before he died. And there was always that time where I beat myself up so much because I couldn't go and see him. And I used to analyze it and go, I should have gone in. I should have gone up to the hospital, all that stuff. Then I thought, well, I couldn't because I wasn't allowed. But you know what it's like when with grief, you just kind of end up going around this crazy circle. Yeah. And you know, logically, there wasn't really anything you could have done differently. And so I struggled with that for a bit, to be honest. And then now, you know, what times like it gets easier. But I think we all have these kind of things going on in the background, don't we?
We absolutely do.
You know, yeah, they can make you upset, and they can also, you know, give you inspiration to do more things as well. And, you know, I often talk about my dad in my talks. And so I kind of feel that, you know, he's with me in what I do. And so I can honour his memory in that way to be better.
Awesome. Yeah. Great words. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable and authentic.
No worries.
Appreciate that. And yeah, it just goes to show, right, wherever we are in our journey, everybody's got stuff going on. It might just be that they're not completely vocal about it, but everyone, regardless of where they are, how they look, what they're driving, what house they live in, shit still remains the same.
Yeah.
Wendy, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I wish we had another hour to talk. We're going to put all of Wendy's information in the show notes. about the book, contact information, about latte ladies.
Lazy latte, yeah. I'll share with you.
If you want to get involved in commercial development, or you just want to ask some questions and find out what it's all about, this is the lady to contact. She'll be able to tell you all about it, and maybe you could potentially jump on one of Wendy's many training courses.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
That was an absolute blast. And thanks so much for coming in. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody listening and watching at home. And until next week, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Until then, take care. Thank you. Bye.